Sure. Here's section 1 of the script, minimum 760 words, written tightly and emotionally, with clear progression, strong pacing, and no filler. It follows the outline without repeating anything or meandering. I used to think I had the kind of life that others envied. A loyal husband, a beautiful son, a best friend who felt more like a sister. Jason and I had been married for 10 years. We had our share of ups and downs, like any couple, but I believed we were solid. He was charming in that quiet, confident way. He'd kiss my forehead every morning before work, pack Ethan's lunch on Fridays when I forgot, and always bought me white tulips when I felt low. Ethan, our son, was the kind of boy that made strangers smile, curious, kind, with big eyes always searching the world for meaning. And then there was Maya, my best friend since college. She knew everything, my dreams, my fears, my marriage struggles. She was around often, always doting on Ethan, always there for me, but things began to shift. It started with silence. Jason stopped telling me about his day. He'd get home late, too tired to talk. His phone was always face down. He flinched once when I reached for it to check the time. He laughed less. He touched me less. Ethan asked me one evening while I tucked him into bed, "Mom, why doesn't Daddy eat dinner with us anymore?" I told him Daddy was busy with work, but my voice cracked halfway through. It was the first time I realized I wasn't the only one noticing the change. Our anniversary came and went without a word from Jason. I waited all day, kept the house spotless, dressed up, lit candles, made his favorite pasta. Ethan helped me draw a little card that said, "Happy Love Day." We waited until Ethan fell asleep on the couch beside me, still holding the card. At 11:48 p.m., Jason texted, "Sorry, crazy day. Rain check. No flowers. No call. Just cold grey words on a bright screen." The candles burned out. Maya called when she saw I hadn't posted anything about the day. She sounded warm. Reassuring. "You know he's under pressure at work," she said. "Don't take it personally." But the unease grew. I started noticing tiny things I couldn't ignore. A strand of unfamiliar hair on his coat. A receipt for dinner at a restaurant we'd never gone to. A perfume I didn't wear clinging faintly to his shirt collar. I sniffed it one morning while doing laundry, and it was floral, subtle and sweet. Later that day, as I helped Ethan tie his shoes, he leaned into me and said, "Maya smells like this too." He smiled innocently. I didn't. My heart sank a little, even though I told myself it meant nothing. Jason's lies weren't obvious. That's what made them dangerous. It was in the way he said nothing when I asked what was wrong. It was in the shrug he gave when I reminded him Ethan had a school recital. He didn't look me in the eyes anymore. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to find him on the couch, pretending to sleep with his phone just out of reach. When I asked if he was okay, he'd say, "Just tired." Always just tired. One afternoon, I walked into our bedroom and found Jason getting ready for a work dinner. He was wearing cologne he never used. A shirt I didn't buy. As he turned to leave, I tried one last time. "Are we okay?" I asked. He paused. "Of course," he said. No warmth. No conviction. Just a rehearsed script. Later that night, I stared at a photo on the living room shelf, Jason, Ethan, and me, smiling at the beach last summer. The sun was bright behind us, our hands interlinked, sand between our toes. I couldn't look away from it. I wondered when the photo had stopped being real. I wondered how long I'd been smiling through a lie. I thought about Maya, and for the first time, something in me whispered a suspicion I didn't want to hear. The next morning, while packing Ethan's lunch, I caught myself shaking. My hands couldn't stay still. Ethan noticed. "Are you sad?" he asked gently. "A little," I replied. He hugged me tight, like he understood more than I thought. He always did. And in that hug, I felt the fragile threads of my life starting to fray, quietly, invisibly, but completely. Let me know when you're ready for section 2, and I'll continue with the next 760 plus words. Here is section 2 of your story script, written with precision, emotional clarity, and no repetition. Minimum 760 words, continuing exactly from where section 1 ended. The day I finally checked Jason's phone, I already knew what I'd find. It wasn't curiosity, it was confirmation. He was in the shower, and his phone buzzed twice. I didn't hesitate. I opened it. Her name was saved under a different contact, Matt, work. The messages were anything but professional. Can't stop thinking about last night. You smell like heaven. Wish I could wake up next to you instead of her. And then, a photo. Blurry. Her hand holding his. I recognized the bracelet, rose gold with a tiny charm. Maya had worn it for years. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, heartbeat drilling into my skull. When Jason came out of the shower, towel slung low, steam following him, I looked up. I didn't speak. I just held the phone out to him. He didn't ask what I saw. He didn't lie. He didn't beg. He exhaled, slow and heavy, as if relieved. Then said, I'm leaving. Not I'm sorry. Not it's a mistake. Just I'm leaving. I didn't cry right then. I nodded. He packed in silence. He left within the hour. No hug for Ethan. No explanation. Just keys in his hand, and the sound of the front door closing behind the man I thought I knew. The first days after felt like walking through water. Thick, slow, heavy. Ethan kept asking where Daddy was. I kept saying he's staying somewhere else for now. But each time, the words tasted more like betrayal. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I told Maya I knew. She didn't answer my call. I wanted to scream. Throw things. Destroy something. But instead, I just stood at the kitchen sink and stared out the window for hours. Ethan would tug at my shirt, asking for snacks, stories, time. I gave him what I could, which wasn't much. And still, he didn't complain. He sat beside me on the couch every night, quietly drawing while I stared at nothing. It was on one of those nights when everything shifted. Ethan was coloring with his markers, legs curled under him, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. He looked up and said something that hollowed me out completely. Mom. I saw Daddy and Aunt Maya kissing in the car. But they told me not to tell you. He said it like he was talking about the weather. I blinked. What did you say, baby? He didn't even flinch. That one time, when we were at the ice cream place. They thought I was asleep. She was in the front seat with him. I saw them kissing. They said it was a secret. I didn't want you to be sad. I couldn't breathe. My son had been carrying that truth. Protecting me. Processing what he saw in silence. I felt like I had failed him, not just by being blind, but by putting him in the position to shield me from something I should have known. I gathered him in my arms and held him for what felt like forever. The betrayal no longer lived in my husband or my best friend. It now echoed through my son's innocent voice. The damage ran deeper than lies or sex or deceit. It had cracked the foundation of our family and forced my child into a secret he never should have carried. That night, I called Emma, my sister. I told her everything. I didn't even cry on the phone, just laid it out like facts. She didn't gasp. She didn't lecture. She just said, "You're going to be okay. You're stronger than this." I didn't believe her, but the next morning, something changed. I woke up, looked at Ethan, and saw not just my son, but a mirror. He was watching me, waiting to see if I'd collapse or fight. And I realized, if he had the courage to tell me the truth, I needed the strength to stand up and face mine. I filed for divorce that afternoon. There was no dramatic confrontation with Jason. No screaming match with Maya. Just a lawyer, some papers, and a line I wouldn't cross again. I told Ethan Daddy wouldn't be living with us anymore. He asked if it was because of the kiss. I told him yes, but also because Daddy made choices that weren't fair to our family. He nodded, as if he already understood. That night, I tucked him into bed. He whispered, "Are you still sad?" I answered honestly, "Yes. But I'm not broken." He hugged me tight, just like he did before. And this time, I hugged him back with everything I had left. Let me know when you're ready for section 3, and I'll write the final part. Here is section 3 of your story script, written with precision, emotional depth, and forward motion. No repetition, no fluff. Minimum 760 words, concluding the story with clarity and power. Healing didn't happen all at once. It started in the smallest ways, making the bed, brushing my hair, putting on real clothes again. I began walking Ethan to school every morning. The silence between us was lighter now. He'd point out birds, clouds, dogs. I'd nod, smile. Listen. That felt like progress. I sold the house within a month. Too many memories lived in those walls. I found a smaller place, 2 bedrooms, lots of sunlight, and just enough space for peace. It didn't feel like starting over. It felt like reclaiming something. There were no echoes of broken promises here. Just space for something honest. Ethan adjusted faster than I expected. He decorated his new room with stickers, magnets, and a giant hand-drawn sign that said "Me and Mom's Place." I didn't cry when I saw it, but I felt something tighten in my chest, a quiet pride. We were still a family, even if it looked different. One afternoon, while helping him with homework, he looked up and asked, "Are you mad at me for not telling you sooner?" I froze. His voice was so small, so unsure. I dropped my pen and held his face in my hands. "No. Never. You didn't do anything wrong. You were protecting me the only way you knew how. You are the reason I got through it." He smiled like he was finally letting go of a weight he didn't realize he was carrying. That night, I started a new bedtime tradition, reading him stories, even ones he'd outgrown. Some nights, he'd ask me to make up my own. So I did. Stories of brave mothers and wise children and broken things that still found ways to shine. One of the hardest parts wasn't the betrayal. It was learning how to trust again, myself, my instincts, my worth. I wrote in a journal every night. Some pages were angry. Some were hollow. But they were honest. Eventually, the words stopped being about pain. They became reflections of growth. I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning to feel alive again. I wrote a letter to Jason and Maya one night. Not to send, just to say everything I never got to. I didn't curse them. I didn't accuse them. I simply wrote, "Thank you for ending the lie. Because now, I can finally live the truth." The next day, I burned it. Ethan watched from the porch, curious. "What are you doing?" he asked, letting go. I said. He nodded like that made perfect sense. We spent weekends differently now. Picnics at the park. Movie nights in pajamas. I stopped worrying about being the perfect mother. I just tried to be a present one. Ethan didn't need perfection. He needed honesty. And love. I had both, finally, to give. Jason called once. He wanted to talk. I said no. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't reopen wounds I had worked too hard to close. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need closure. I had a. I never heard from Maya. And I didn't want to. The silence between us was louder than any explanation she could offer. That silence, in time, became peace. I started writing publicly, a blog about betrayal, motherhood, and moving forward. It wasn't planned. I just posted a few thoughts one night, and to my surprise, people responded. Women wrote to me, saying they felt seen. Understood. Less alone. I kept writing. Not for revenge. Not for sympathy. But because my voice had been quiet too long. One post in particular went viral. The title was simple, "My son saw what I refused to." It was about the day Ethan told me the truth. About how children sometimes carry more wisdom than the adults around them. About how he saved me without knowing it. I ended that post with a line I'll never forget. He told me what my heart already knew but couldn't face. And in that moment, I found not just the truth, but the strength to rise. Months passed. Our life settled. Not into perfection, but into something genuine. Something real. One evening, while we sat on the porch watching the sky change colors, Ethan leaned his head on my shoulder. "Do you think we'll always be okay?" I looked at him, brushed his hair back gently, and said, "We already are." And I meant it. Let me know if you'd like a full version formatted for voiceover, with pacing and timing included. Certainly. Here's section 4 of your infidelity story script, original, direct, emotional, and consistent with tone and narrative flow. Minimum 760 words, no repetition, no filler, and keeping everything moving forward. A few weeks after things settled, I received an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a letter, handwritten. I recognized Maya's handwriting instantly. I stared at it for a long time before reading. Part of me didn't want to. But I owed it to myself to face everything, not just the easy parts. She started with my name. No apology. No excuses. Just pages of self-justification dressed in emotional language. She wrote that she didn't mean to fall in love with Jason. That it started as emotional support and became something else. She said she'd felt invisible in her own relationships and Jason made her feel seen. She called what they had unexpected. She claimed it just happened. I didn't feel anger reading it. I felt numb. Her words didn't sting. They felt empty. She hadn't written to take responsibility, she wrote to remove guilt from her shoulders. She called me the strongest person she knew. As if that would soften the betrayal. She wrote that she missed our friendship, that she still thought of Ethan, that she hoped, someday, I could understand. I folded the letter and put it away in a drawer. Not because I needed to keep it, but because throwing it away immediately felt like giving it importance. I didn't reply. I never planned to. Around that time, Ethan started drawing pictures of our family again, but this time, it was just the two of us. He'd hand them to me with pride, and I'd pin them up around the house like artwork in a gallery. Each one was a quiet affirmation that we were enough. At school, one of his teachers pulled me aside. She said Ethan had told her, "My mom is the bravest person I know." I smiled and thanked her, but in truth, I felt the weight of those words for days. I wasn't sure I was brave. I had just refused to stay broken. One afternoon, I noticed something different about myself. I laughed. Genuinely. Fully. It wasn't about something huge, just a silly video Ethan showed me, but it hit me afterward how long it had been since I laughed without pain sitting beneath it. I let myself feel it. And then I cried, not from grief, but from relief. Small things began to bring me back to life. I cooked meals I actually wanted to eat. I started jogging again, not to escape, but to feel strong. I reconnected with old friends I'd pushed away during the chaos. They didn't ask questions, they just welcomed me back like I'd never left. That mattered more than I could explain. I also began seeing a therapist. I thought it would be about the betrayal. Instead, it became about rediscovery. I unpacked layers I hadn't acknowledged in years. Turns out, somewhere in the noise of marriage, motherhood, and survival, I had forgotten myself. The woman with dreams, ideas, needs, she'd been quiet for too long. But she was still there. Waiting. One of the most important things I learned in those sessions was this: healing doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means choosing not to let it define you anymore. That shift changed everything. Jason still saw Ethan sometimes. Their interactions were limited but civil. I kept it structured. Clear. Controlled. He tried once to talk about what happened between us. I stopped him immediately. You made your choices. I've made mine. There's nothing left to discuss. He didn't try again. Ethan adjusted to the new rhythm. Some days were harder. Other days, it was like nothing had changed. I made space for his questions, his emotions, his silence. He didn't need a perfect mother. He needed one who showed up. Every day, I chose to be that for him. One evening, I wrote something in my journal that felt like the final piece clicking into place. I was not destroyed. I was rerouted. That single line carried everything I'd lived through. I didn't lose myself in the wreckage. I found the parts that mattered most. A few months later, I took Ethan on a short trip to the mountains. Just the two of us. No distractions. No past hanging over us. We hiked. We laughed. We built a fire and roasted marshmallows. It was quiet. Safe. Real. As we sat watching the stars, he looked up at me and said, "I like our life." It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was ours. Built from honesty, rebuilt from ashes, shaped by truth, and that was more than enough. Let me know if you'd like a final epilogue, YouTube-ready formatting, or title, tagline suggestions to match your faceless storytelling format.